afternoon. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Apple farmers demonstrate to demand the government take action over what they say are the barriers to selling their products. Hospitals are struggling to cope in Syria's Aleppo as government and Russian fighter jets continue to pound the city's rebel-held east, killing more than 200 people in just a week. And FARC, Colombia's biggest rebel movement, will sign a historic peace accord with the government aimed at ending a war that has lasted 5 decades and killed 220,000 people. Agriculture Minister Akram Shayib has announced a decision that would block companies from importing certain produce without prior approval in an apparent response to demands by local farmers struggling to sell their products. The ministry's decree says importers of frozen apples, pears and potatoes will now be required to obtain a license from the agriculture minister. Earlier in the day, apple farmers in the coastal city of Jbeil held a brief demonstration to demand the government take action over what they said were barriers to selling their products. The farmers later opened the highway after receiving assurances that they will meet with Prime Minister Tamam Salam and Shayib. Shayib has said in an interview with OTV that he was working with Salam to find a way to help farmers refrigerate their apples to improve the market price of the produce. Telecom Minister Boutros Harib has stressed on the necessity to hold a cabinet session to tackle issues pertaining to the daily life of citizens, mainly the current problem of finding a market for the apple season. Following talks with Prime Minister Tamam Salam at the Grand Sarai, Harib warned that any suspension of the cabinet's work could harm the Lebanese. He assured that Salam had contacted the representative of the World Bank in Lebanon, asking his help to resolve the apple market crisis. Harib also noted that the Premier had already spoken with the World Bank chief in New York regarding the matter, and the latter's response was positive. Tourism Minister Michel Faraoun has warned against refusing dialogue with Christian political factions, saying it would eventually lead to a national representational crisis. Most Christian parties argue that the 1960 electoral law devalues Christian votes in some parts of the country where they constitute a majority. The Change and Reform bloc headed by MP Michel Aoun has been rallying behind a proportional representation system with Lebanon as one constituency, saying such a system was best to represent all minorities. Meanwhile, the Lebanese forces support a proposal that would see 60 MPs elected on the basis of proportional representation and the remaining 68 MPs on a winner-takes-all system. The proposal is also backed by the Future Movement and the Progressive Socialist Party. Faraoun also stressed on the economic and institutional consequences of marginalizing Christian parties and failing to elect a Maronite Lebanese president. Hospitals are struggling to cope in Syria's Aleppo as government and Russian fighter jets continue to pound the city's rebel-held east, killing more than 200 people in under a week. Reporters on the ground described a bleak situation as the hospital overflowed with dozens of dead and wounded people. At an emergency meeting of the UN on Sunday, the US, Britain and France accused Russia, a key military backer of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, of war crimes.
What Russia is sponsoring and doing is not counterterrorism, it is barbarism.
It is something that has been written down in all of the documents. Nothing was done.
Russia and Assad have reportedly launched more than 150 airstrikes over the last 72 hours, killing at least 139 people and injuring hundreds more, laying waste to what is left of an iconic Middle Eastern city. These are people who have suffered horribly in the 5.5 years of war, yet they call the attacks from the air unprecedented in quantity and quality.
I thank Mr. de Mastera for his briefing, and I now give the...
Instead of pursuing peace, Russia and Assad make war. Instead of helping get life-saving aid to civilians, Russia and Assad are bombing the humanitarian convoys, hospitals, and first responders who are trying desperately to keep people alive.
I'm still convinced that we can turn the course of events. We have proven this more than once before.
The indiscriminate and systematic use of...
Because any sign of me resigning would be a signal that the international community is quitting the Syrians. And the UN will never quit the Syrians, and neither will you.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Western countries are not coping with their obligations on Syria. Lavrov also said the United States wanted to put forward additional conditions before implementing a deal on Syria, and that Russia would demand a very thorough investigation into a strike on an aid convoy in the war-torn country. Coming up next, Palestinian leaders criticized Donald Trump for saying he will recognize Jerusalem as Israel's undivided capital if elected president. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. Palestinian leaders have accused U.S. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump of abandoning any hope of a two-state solution after he said he would recognize Jerusalem as Israel's undivided capital if he became president. During a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump pledged he would recognize Israel's claim over East Jerusalem, which would put Washington at odds with most UN member states. Saeb Erekat, Secretary General of the Palestine Liberation Organization, said Trump's statement shows disregard for international law and long-standing U.S. foreign policy regarding the status of Jerusalem. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry issued a statement criticizing Trump, as well as his Democrat rival in November's election, Hillary Clinton, accusing her of overly favoring Israel at the expense of the Palestinians. An Egyptian health ministry official says a total of 170 bodies have been pulled from the waters 5 days after a boat carrying hundreds of migrants capsized in the Mediterranean while attempting to head to Europe. The death toll is expected to rise as many bodies are believed to be trapped inside the boat's refrigerator. The boat is believed to be at a depth of 15 meters, about 18 kilometers from Egyptian shores. Governor Mohammed Sultan of Bahira province told the Associated Press that a vessel is being sent by British Petroleum with specialized equipment to help lift the 80-ton boat. French President François Hollande has met with Calais officials and politicians to discuss the infamous Calais jungle migrant camp, which is currently home to at least 7,000 migrants. Hollande, French Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve and Housing Minister Emmanuel Cos met with officials including Calais Mayor Natasha Bouchard and Regional President Xavier Bertrand to alleviate concerns over the camp and its impact on the port town. Earlier today, Hollande promised to close the camp, which sprung up on the outskirts of the port, as migrants hoping to reach Britain were halted at the border, with many living in squalid conditions in ramshackle huts and makeshift lodgings provided by the French government. The government's handling of the migrant crisis in Calais has become politically sensitive. Moving on to Latin America, FARC, Colombia's biggest rebel movement, will sign a historic peace accord with the government aimed at ending a war that has lasted 5 decades and killed about 220,000 people. The pact will be signed by Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos and rebel fighter known by the alias Timochenko in the city of Cartagena in a process that took more than 4 years to finalize. 15 South American presidents, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and US Secretary of State John Kerry are scheduled to witness the signing ceremony. More than 2,500 guests have been invited to wear white as a sign of peace, and Santos will add his signature to the 297-page accord with a pen made from a recycled shell used in the combat. The signing ceremony, however, will not officially close the deal. Colombians are being given the final say on endorsing or rejecting it in an October 2nd referendum. Well, this marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. Apple farmers demonstrate to demand the government take action over what they say are barriers to selling their products. Hospitals are struggling to cope in Syria's Aleppo as government and Russian fighter jets continue to pound the city's rebel-held east, killing more than 200 people in under a week. And FARC, Colombia's biggest rebel movement, will sign a historic peace accord with the government aimed at ending a war that has lasted 5 decades and killed 220,000 people. Those are your top stories for this Monday. I'm Lynette Tamim, and I thank you all for watching us.